Some wounds never announce themselves. They do not bruise the skin or interrupt daily function. They simply settle quietly into the nervous system, teaching a child how to be small inside their own life. Growing up emotionally alone does not always look like neglect. Sometimes it looks like a full house, food on the table, routine, rules, smiles in public. Yet beneath that structure, something essential is missing. Not love, but attunement. Not abuse, but absence. The absence of being emotionally seen, of having inner worlds noticed, mirrored, protected. And so the child learns a silent language. Feel quietly, need privately, handle everything alone. This is not a dramatic trauma, it is a quiet one. And it shapes how closeness feels long after childhood ends. There is a certain clarity that comes only in the stillness of memory. It is not loud or dramatic. It does not arrive with fanfare. Instead, it lingers quietly, like sunlight slipping through a window at dawn, touching the edges of what was always present but never noticed. For those who grew up emotionally alone, this clarity often appears first as a sense, a whisper, a knowing that something was missing. A child may not have the language to name it. They might describe it in fragments. No one listens. I had to handle it myself. I didn't matter enough to ask. These are not cries for attention in the usual sense. They are subtle observations recorded in the body, in the pauses between words, in the tension behind a smile. Over time, these whispers accumulate, forming a quiet map of absence. The recognition is rarely sudden. Often, it is like noticing a shadow stretching longer than it should, or hearing an echo where none seems to exist. The child grows accustomed to this silence. They learn that feelings can be contained, needs can be postponed, and presence can be scarce without judgment. And in this containment, they discover a strange, paradoxical comfort. If the world cannot hold them, perhaps they can hold themselves. But even as they adapt, there is a persistent inner ache. It is not loud, not urgent, but steady, a yearning for attunement, for the simple acknowledgement that their inner life exists. It is the longing to have their feelings mirrored, their thoughts received, their fears held without dismissal. This desire does not demand drama. It is quiet and dignified. It waits patiently, sometimes for decades, for recognition from others, but most poignantly, from themselves. In some ways, growing up emotionally alone teaches survival. The child develops a keen observation of emotional climates, an intuitive reading of moods, and an ability to navigate relationships carefully, anticipating rejection or disinterest before it arrives. They become sensitive, cautious, and remarkably self-sufficient. And yet underneath this skill lies a hidden fragility, the unspoken knowledge that their needs are real, yet often unmet. Recognition of this absence can happen at any moment, in a pause during a conversation, in the ache of loneliness that visits despite company, or in the sudden awareness that a gesture of care is unfamiliar and therefore startling. It is in these moments that memory and body align, revealing the quiet truth: childhood was lived in emotional isolation. This recognition is not blame. It is not an indictment of caregivers, nor a tally of neglect. It is a gentle acknowledgement of experience, a soft noticing of what was lacking alongside what was present. Even in homes filled with love, routine, or protection, the absence of emotional attunement leaves its mark. It teaches children to internalize their longing, to contain their feelings, and to seek safety in self-reliance. By naming it, by noticing it, the child's silent world begins to take form in consciousness. It becomes visible, if only dimly, and in that visibility lies the first step toward understanding, in awareness that the quiet ache, the shadow that stretches through memory, is not a failing of the child, but a reflection of circumstances beyond their control. This chapter of recognition is the beginning of a long journey. It is the acknowledgement that silence, though pervasive, has a shape, that absence, though subtle, leaves traces in thought, in body, in the way one moves through the world. And it is in the careful observation of these traces that the path toward understanding and eventually healing quietly begins. The roots of emotional aloneness are rarely dramatic. They are not always found in moments of explicit harm or visible neglect. Instead, they often begin in subtler ways, patterns of absence that are quiet, habitual, and unintentional. A parent may be present in body but absent in attention, attentive to schedules, chores, and discipline, yet blind to the inner currents of the child's heart. A home may be orderly, comfortable, safe, yet lacking the attunement that whispers, "I see you, you are felt, you are enough." Generational patterns weave through these absences. Caregivers may have learned early in life that emotions are burdens, that expressing needs invites rejection, or that vulnerability is unsafe. When adults unconsciously replicate these strategies, the child experiences not deliberate neglect, but the echo of scarcity passed down. Love exists, often fiercely, yet it is constrained, filtered through fear, distraction, or limitation. In this environment, absence does not feel like a void created by someone else. It simply is. Emotional aloneness often begins at the intersections of need and attention. The child learns quickly which feelings are tolerable, which are ignored, and which are inconvenient. Tears may be brushed away, questions met with impatience, or excitement returned with neutrality. In these moments, the child internalizes a silent lesson. Emotional expression is a private affair, and self-reliance is safer than exposure. The origins of this silence can also be entwined with societal expectations. Certain emotions, anger, sadness, anxiety, are minimized in children, dismissed as exaggeration or labeled as weakness. In cultures that value stoicism or achievement over inner reflection, children learn that emotional expression is negotiable, even dangerous. They begin to practice emotional invisibility, not out of rebellion, but out of instinct for survival. Yet absence is not total. There are glimpses of warmth, fleeting moments of attunement that shine like sparks in the darkness. A smile shared at the right time, a soft word during illness, a hug offered when fear rises. These moments are like islands, brief and memorable, showing the child that connection is possible, even if inconsistent. But they are not enough to form a reliable map. The child learns to navigate with partial guides, to move between scarcity and abundance, to anticipate disappointment without fully naming it. What begins as observation slowly becomes habit. The child develops strategies to manage emotional absence. They become quiet, careful, and often hyper-aware of the moods around them. They learn to moderate their own needs, to ration attention, and to seek safety in predictability rather than intimacy. And while these strategies may appear as strength to outsiders, internally they form the groundwork for subtle fractures, a sense that closeness is conditional, and that one's feelings are negotiable rather than inherent. Understanding the origins of emotional aloneness requires gentle reflection. It is not a search for blame, but a tracing of lineage, of patterns, limitations, and the unintentional silences that shaped a child's emotional reality. It is in recognizing the invisible architecture of absence that the story of self begins to emerge. In this chapter of origins, one begins to see the interplay between environment and psyche. The child is both observer and participant, absorbing lessons from every gesture, every withheld glance, every moment of unnoticed grief. Emotional solitude is not merely a circumstance, it becomes a lens through which the child perceives the world. And while the roots may be hidden, their influence stretches into thought, behavior, and feeling, quietly guiding the ways in which the child will seek or avoid connection for years to come. The journey toward understanding begins with seeing these roots, tracing the line from subtle absence to internalized patterns, and acknowledging that the child's silent adaptation was not a failure, but a testament to resilience. The past does not define possibility, but it shapes the contours of inner life, preparing the way for both recognition and eventual healing. The mind of a child growing up emotionally alone is a landscape both vivid and quiet, intricate yet guarded. It absorbs lessons not in words but in atmospheres, the tension in a parent's sigh, the pause in conversation, the indifference that drifts like a slow fog across daily life. These lessons are neither deliberate nor cruel, they are survival. And over time, they shape the architecture of thought, feeling, and self. From a psychological perspective, early emotional absence interacts with attachment systems in profound ways. When caregivers are inconsistent, unresponsive, or emotionally unavailable, the child's developing brain adapts. It learns to expect unpredictability in care. This is not a failure of biology, but a sophisticated survival strategy. To anticipate the moods of others, to moderate one's own expression, to internalize needs for safety rather than externalize them. The child becomes their own caretaker, their own comfort, their own witness. Neuroscientifically, the brain records absence as a signal of threat. Emotional neglect, even subtle, activates the stress response repeatedly, teaching the nervous system vigilance and hyper-awareness. A child becomes attuned to every micro-expression, every tone, every silence, learning to navigate unpredictability. Over time, these adaptations may feel automatic, invisible, and necessary, yet they carry a hidden cost. Emotional self-regulation comes at the expense of spontaneous connection, and sensitivity becomes a weight rather than a gift. The mind also learns to compartmentalize. Feelings too large or unmet or stored, tucked away like delicate objects in a hidden drawer. Joy, fear, sadness, longing. These emotions continue to exist, but they are often observed from a distance. This creates a duality. The inner world is alive, yet separate, partially inaccessible even to its own owner. The child becomes both participant in life and a quiet observer of it, always measuring, adjusting, and moderating. Cognitive patterns emerge from these early lessons. The child often interprets emotional absence as personal responsibility. I should not burden others. I must manage this alone. My needs are too much. These beliefs are not irrational, they are adaptive. Yet they crystallize into lifelong tendencies towards self-reliance, emotional suppression, and subtle distrust of intimacy. The mind learns efficiency over expression, strategy over spontaneity, and caution over risk. At the same time, the mind remains sensitive to connection. It may hunger quietly for attunement, scanning interactions for glimpses of care, mirroring, or acknowledgement. A fleeting smile, a warm glance, a moment of true listening. These experiences register profoundly, often triggering joy mixed with fear, longing mingled with hesitation. The mind remembers even the smallest instances of being seen because they are rare. Each one reinforces the possibility of connection, however fragile or fleeting. Emotional learning in this context is not uniform. Some children develop hyper-independence, excelling at self-sufficiency while avoiding vulnerability. Others cultivate acute empathy, becoming caretakers themselves, attuned to the feelings of others, sometimes at the expense of their own. Many carry a paradoxical blend, craving closeness while fearing it, longing to be known while guarding their interior world. This duality is a hallmark of minds shaped by emotional aloneness, a quiet, intricate dance between need and self-protection. Understanding what the mind has learned is not about fault, it is about recognition, clarity, and compassion. The patterns, beliefs, and neural pathways that formed in childhood are not flaws, they are survival strategies, elegant adaptations to a world that was emotionally inconsistent. They are also invitations for awareness. By observing them gently, one begins to see not only the limits imposed by absence, but the resilience and ingenuity the mind has cultivated in response. In this chapter of insight, the child's adaptations are reframed. Emotional aloneness is no longer an abstract loss. It becomes a lens through which the mind interprets the world, a set of invisible structures quietly shaping perception, desire, and behavior. And in naming these patterns, one begins the work of understanding how deeply absence can leave its mark, and how understanding itself can become the first step toward inner presence. Growing up emotionally alone often creates an internal division, a split between what is felt and what is expressed, between longing and self-protection. The child learns early that desires for connection may not be safe, that vulnerability can invite disappointment, and so a quiet separation forms, a part of self that yearns, that hopes, that trembles with emotion, and another part that observes, moderates, and shields. This is the inner split. It manifests in subtle ways. A child may laugh freely on the outside while internally measuring every gesture for signs of acceptance. They may respond with politeness when irritation rises or suppress tears when frustration overwhelms. Each act of self-regulation is a protective measure, a silent contract with the world. If I hide this part of me, perhaps I will be safe. Over time, this habitual self-containment becomes second nature. Yet the yearning never fully disappears. It persists as a quiet pulse beneath the surface, a longing to be fully seen, fully heard, fully accepted. When relationships are formed, this pulse can be both magnetic and destabilizing. The emotionally alone child, now grown, may crave closeness yet resist it, seeking intimacy but fearing exposure. Trust becomes a careful negotiation, and vulnerability feels risky even when welcomed. This split also creates a subtle tension within identity. The self that was taught to survive independently may reject the self that longs for closeness, labeling it as weak, needy, or indulgent. Confusion arises. The desire for connection is genuine, yet the strategies developed to survive in absence, self-reliance, emotional restraint, hypervigilance, can feel incompatible with it. The individual oscillates between engagement and withdrawal, closeness and distance, presence and avoidance. Psychologically, this is a natural adaptation. The mind and body are attempting to balance competing needs, safety and belonging, autonomy and intimacy. The split is not a flaw, it is a sophisticated survival mechanism. The child's early experiences taught them that expressing need was dangerous, so they built an internal system to manage it. What emerges in adulthood is a tension between self-protection and desire, a constant negotiation within the psyche. Emotionally, the inner split can manifest as self-doubt, ambivalence, or emotional fatigue. Relationships may feel confusing, with impulses toward closeness followed by instinctive withdrawal. The individual may find themselves giving care more readily than receiving it, overcompensating for a childhood of unmet needs. Even moments of tenderness can be tinged with anxiety. Will this last? Will I be abandoned? These thoughts are echoes of early experience, the imprint of a world that could not fully witness or respond. At the same time, the split contains potential. By recognizing the duality within, the individual begins to understand their own patterns. Awareness allows for the possibility of integration, even if gradual. The longing does not need to be silenced, the protective part does not need to dominate. Both can coexist, inform one another, and eventually guide choices in ways that honor past survival while inviting present connection. The inner split is also deeply human. Many people carry it in varying forms, the tension between hope and caution, yearning and restraint, visibility and privacy. For those who grew up emotionally alone, it is more pronounced but not unique. It is the echo of a silent classroom in which emotional literacy was never fully taught, yet adaptive strategies were mastered with quiet precision. In this chapter, the split is observed without judgment, its complexity is acknowledged, its necessity honored. It is a gentle reflection on the tension between who one has been and who one longs to be, between self-protection and connection. And in noticing this tension, one finds a kind of quiet respect for the resilience that has carried them this far, a resilience that, while born from absence, may one day allow presence to be embraced fully. Awareness often arrives quietly, in ways that do not feel dramatic or urgent. For those who grew up emotionally alone, the moment of realization is rarely a single event. It is a series of soft awakenings, glimpses of truth that unfold slowly, revealing the patterns that have quietly shaped their life. It may come in the reflection of a relationship, the echo of a past memory, or the simple recognition of recurring emotional responses that feel familiar and uninvited. This moment is not about blame or accusation, it is about clarity, a person begins to see that their instinct to self-protect, to contain feelings, and to moderate desires is not a personal failing, but a response to a childhood shaped by absence. They notice the way their nervous system tenses in anticipation of emotional unavailability, the way intimacy can feel both magnetic and frightening, the quiet internal dialogue that whispers, "I must handle this alone." Often, realization arises in contrast. When moments of genuine care, attunement, or empathy appear, the mind recognizes them as foreign, yet deeply compelling. A friend who listens without judgment, a partner who mirrors emotion authentically, or even a therapist who validates experience can illuminate the gaps left by childhood. In these moments, the patterns of aloneness are not erased, but they become visible. They are no longer invisible under the surface. They are mapped, observed, and understood. This clarity can be startling. Adults may recognize long-standing fears of dependence, subtle avoidance of closeness, or the internalized belief that needs are burdensome. They may notice patterns in relationships, choosing partners who are emotionally distant, overgiving to avoid conflict, or self-silencing when hurt arises. These observations are often tinged with sadness, yet they carry a profound relief. Finally, the silent rules that govern so much of life are named. Finally, the past is reflected upon with consciousness rather than unconscious repetition. The realization also reveals resilience. Awareness illuminates not only what was absent, but what was learned. The capacity for self-soothing, the skill of careful observation, the ability to navigate social landscapes with nuance. What was born from necessity is also a testament to adaptability. Recognition transforms patterns of survival into understanding, showing that the strategies that once protected the child can now inform self-awareness rather than dictate behavior. It is common for this moment to come in fragments rather than all at once. A person may recognize one pattern, then another, each discovery softening confusion and building insight. Emotional aloneness begins to feel less like a personal defect and more like a history written into experience, nervous system, and relational patterns. The realization carries both weight and relief. It acknowledges absence while honoring the person who has carried it. This stage is also tender. Confronting a lifetime of quiet absence can awaken grief for what was never felt, never mirrored, never known. It may stir longing for parents or caregivers who could not provide attunement. Yet grief, when witnessed safely, becomes a bridge to understanding. It allows for the softening of self-judgment, the recognition that survival demanded ingenuity, and the quiet acknowledgement that the child within deserves recognition, even now. The moment of realization is a threshold. It is a pause, a breath, an opening. It does not erase the past, nor does it demand immediate transformation. Instead, it illuminates the inner map, showing where absence once ruled, where protective patterns were formed, and where the possibility of presence now exists. In this clarity, awareness becomes gentle illumination, the first step toward learning how to inhabit emotional space differently, more fully, and with conscious care. Healing does not always arrive as a sudden revelation. It is seldom dramatic or instantaneous. For those who grew up emotionally alone, learning emotional presence is a gradual, tender process, a practice in noticing, feeling, and receiving without judgment. It is the cultivation of awareness that emotions exist not only to be contained, but to be held, acknowledged, and expressed. The first step often begins quietly, with small moments of noticing. A thought arises, a feeling stirs, and instead of suppressing it, the individual pauses. They allow themselves to observe without correction. Anxiety, sadness, longing, each emotion is treated as a visitor, worthy of attention, rather than a disruption to be managed. This subtle act begins to retrain the nervous system. It learns that emotions can exist without danger, that being seen by oneself and by others can be safe. Emotional presence also emerges in relationships. Slowly, one discovers that some people respond with attunement, with listening that mirrors and validates experience, a friend who remembers what was shared yesterday, a partner who senses discomfort before it is spoken, a colleague who offers patience instead of judgment. These interactions become exercises in recognition. They teach the body and mind that connection is possible, that vulnerability is not always punished, and that intimacy can be experienced without fear. Within this learning, boundaries are soft but clear. Emotional presence is not about constant exposure or dissolving the protective self. It is about balance, knowing when to express, when to pause, and when to retreat into safety. The adult who grew up alone discovers that self-reliance can coexist with openness, that autonomy does not exclude connection, and that the child within can be held gently while engaging fully with the present. The process is not linear. There are relapses, moments of discomfort, and old patterns that reemerge. The impulse to self-silence, to anticipate rejection, or to moderate needfulness may arise unbidden. Yet awareness allows these moments to be observed rather than acted upon automatically. Recognition transforms reaction into reflection, fear into curiosity. Each time an emotion is noticed and received, neural pathways of presence strengthen, slowly retraining the mind and body to tolerate and even welcome feeling. Internal dialogue shifts gradually. The voice that once whispered, "I must handle this alone," begins to soften. It is replaced by a gentler presence. It is okay to feel. It is okay to ask. It is okay to be seen. These phrases are not forced affirmations, but quiet truths internalized through practice, repetition, and the gentle experience of safety. The child who learns self-containment begins to inhabit the self more fully, integrating need and presence into daily life. This learning also touches the senses of imagination and memory. The adult revisits past experiences with compassion, imagining the child within receiving acknowledgement, witnessing their own feelings, and experiencing attunement that was once absent. These reflections do not rewrite the past, they create a safe inner landscape where absence can coexist with recognition. Over time, this inner practice informs outward experience, guiding choices in relationships, work, and daily interaction. Ultimately, learning emotional presence is a reclamation of what was never fully received. It is a patient witnessing of the self, an honoring of inner life, and a deliberate cultivation of attunement that was absent in childhood. It allows the quiet ache of aloneness to soften, not vanish, creating space for vulnerability, intimacy, and trust. It is neither fast nor linear, but it is profound, a slow awakening into the experience of being fully felt and alive within one's own world. Even after years of absence, even after patterns of self-reliance have been honed into skill, there remains a soft core, a tenderness that persists beneath layers of survival, beneath careful strategies and measured words. It is the part that still remembers longing, that still feels the pull of being seen, that still carries the quiet ache of wanting to matter. This softness is not weakness, it is the residue of humanity, the imprint of the child who needed recognition and in small ways still needs it. The soft core manifests in many ways. It lives in empathy, the instinct to notice subtle shifts in others' moods, the ability to sense unspoken need. It exists in creativity, in the imagination of someone who has spent decades observing, internalizing, and interpreting the world from the margins. It is in patience, in gentleness with oneself and with others, cultivated from years of understanding what it means to navigate absence. This tenderness is also a compass. It points toward connection, reminding the individual that while patterns of aloneness shaped them, they are not confined to those patterns. It nudges toward relationships that feel safe, toward experiences that resonate with authenticity, toward moments where vulnerability is met with presence rather than dismissal. The soft core is a guide, subtle but persistent, toward emotional attunement that is learned, nurtured, and earned. Even in the presence of absence, life continues to offer small intimacies.
the warmth of sunlight on skin, the quiet rhythm of a familiar song, the resonance of a conversation that lingers in memory. For those who grew up emotionally alone, these moments carry profound weight. They teach the body and mind that connection exists outside of past limitations, that tenderness can be received and shared, and that emotional life need not be a landscape of guarded shadows. Softness also invites reflection. One may think back to childhood not with anger or shame, but with recognition and compassion. The child who waited to be seen, who learned self-containment, who navigated absence with ingenuity. This child is honored in memory, held in the imagination with gentleness. Past wounds remain, but they are no longer invisible. They are acknowledged as shaping forces that coexist with resilience and capacity for presence. There is a quiet continuity here. Emotional aloneness leaves traces, yes, but so does human adaptability. The patterns learned for survival remain, but they can coexist with tenderness. The nervous system may still tense at perceived rejection. The mind may still anticipate disappointment, but these responses can now be observed with curiosity, recognized as echoes rather than imperatives. The soft core remains intact, capable of expansion, capable of receiving, capable of quiet joy. Closure, in this sense, is not an erasure of the past, but a reconciliation with it. It is an acknowledgement that life carries both absence and presence, longing and fulfillment, vulnerability and resilience. The person who grew up emotionally alone carries these dualities with them, not as contradictions, but as evidence of their full humanity. In honoring what remains soft, one cultivates a life that is emotionally richer, more attuned, and more compassionate towards self and others. And so the journey concludes not with dramatic triumph, but with a quiet awareness. The child within still exists, still soft, still yearning, yet the adult who observes that child has learned presence, attunement, and self-compassion. The ache of absence no longer defines life, it informs it. The soft core is the pulse of resilience, the enduring capacity to feel, to connect, and to exist fully in the gentle, complex, deeply human.